Hello, welcome to the Pivot to Profit interview series. I'm your host, Landa Richards. This show is for anyone who's looking to up their game either in work or play and learn how others have overcome challenges successfully. This is where we talk to business leaders who will share their formula for pivoting on a pitfall to executing on their most profitable idea. If you want to talk pivots and profits between episodes, follow me on LinkedIn. I am thrilled to have this guest here today. Her name is Lewena Bayer. For over 20 years, Dr. Lewena Bayer, CEO of Civility Experts, has led the team of 500 plus affiliates in 48 countries. The organization is recognized internationally as the leading experts on civility at work. Lew is a multi-best-selling author, in-demand speaker, and professional trainer who is also volunteer executive director for the National Civility Center, education director for Global Goodwill Ambassadors, and spokesperson for Aegis Trust. Welcome, Lewena. How are you?
Just fine. Hello, Landa. Thank you for having me.
I am thrilled you're here. Could you tell our guests a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am entrepreneur, I guess 30 years in now. Civility Experts for about 26 of those years. I am originally a prairie girl from Saskatchewan, Canada, and I went to school in Montreal and in Manitoba, and I reside now in Manitoba, where our head office for Civility Experts is. I have the good fortune, because we have about 500 affiliates around the world, of traveling and teaching about 300 days a year, and I would describe myself as a continuous learner, an eternal optimist. And I would say that over the years, the thing that defines me is an understanding that civility is its own reward.
Yeah, I love that. I know there's a lot of people that probably hear civility and have, 4 or 5 different ideas on what that is. Could you give us a little definition or your working definition around civility?
Sure, and I'm so grateful that you asked that, because the truth is many people undervalue or underestimate the power of civility, because they think that it's manners, that it's about don't wear white after Labor Day, that it's about Martha Stewart perfection, that it's overtly feminine. And the reality is that's not civility at all. In fact, in many ways, those notions are contrary to civility. Civility, the way we define it at Civility Experts, is a measurable competency. It's about people treatment. It's a values proposition. And we use a 3-pronged definition, where civility is a conscious awareness of the impact of your thoughts, actions, words, and intentions, combined with a continuous acknowledgement of our responsibility, or your responsibility, to somehow ease the experience of others. And for example, you can do that through manners and etiquette. And the 3rd prong is a consistent effort to choose civility as a non-negotiable point of character. So unlike manners, if you're truly civil, you can't be civil Mondays and Wednesday morning. It's something that becomes who you are, not just what you do. And it's a part of what's embedded in how you make decisions, how you interact with people, and so on.
So it sounds almost like it's a value that people have to embed.
Oh, yes, I would say it's an underpinning value, in fact, that if you are civil, it means that you're naturally focused on integrity and authenticity and humility and generosity. Some people loosely reference those things as compassion or kindness, but I mean, it's all of those things. But I think entwined with that is non-judgment, some accountability, some responsibility, some social intelligence, some cultural competence. There's 4 skills that underpin the ability to be civil, by the way we define it. And I think once people understand that it's a measurable competency, business owners, CEOs, HR, for example, they begin to see how civility can impact the bottom line. And there's all sorts of meaty research validating that.
I find it fascinating, frankly. I was wondering how you actually got into this work.
Well, my first real job, I was director of operations for a hotel chain, and anyone who's ever worked hospitality or service industry knows that it's long hours, holidays, nights, early mornings. People are on vacation for the most part or out to dinner. They're not always on their best behavior, and over the course of that work, I learned, um, sadly, some employers don't treat their staff well. Um, Employees don't treat each other well. Ethics can be a problem, not just that industry, but I learned a lot of really hard lessons about people and human nature, an absence of human, what we call humankind, like human hyphen kindness,
Mhm.
that I came to understand now in my work is rampant, no matter what sector you're in, sadly. But, hospitality was a really good education for me in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. So why is this work so important?
Well, I think that it's critical. We're seeing what's going on, around the world. We're in Canada, so, if we look at how COVID is impacting people and how they behave, if we look at issues like Black Lives Matter, any aspect of politics is certainly related to civil dialogue. People's rights and freedoms, at the root of it is civility. The work I do with Aegis Trust is about peace and humanity. That ties to civility. But, in terms of day to day, one alarming thing that I'll share with you is the Center for Disease Control said that depression that we can tie to stress at work will be second only to ischemic heart disease by 2025. That the majority of working adults will experience depression that makes them almost unable to function in their work and their life. And when we look closer at the research and see that often that stress ties to the way they're treated at work, people treatment and civility, and employers and coworkers, we can actually do something about that, and change, the way people, their quality of life. To me, suddenly civility is a non-negotiable aspect of workplace wellness.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that now that mental health has come to the forefront when it's a personal issue or certain workplaces, that now it starts to show where this just isn't at home or at XYZ company or that industry. It's a broad blanket.
Oh, for sure. And it can stem everything from, we don't have enough accountability whereby people are paid fairly, even minimum wage for the actual hours that they work, like some of that kind of social justice, fair pay for equal work, those kind of aspects. But then everything from bullying at work to harassment to, the tone of email communications to technology issues. Is it actually impacting our mental health that we are tethered to our devices 24/7 and feeling obligation to employers who only pay you for 8.5 hours, those kind of things. It's really a never ending um, list of issues related to incivility that contribute to our overall physical and mental and emotional health.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's powerful. So along the journey that you've been on for 2 decades around this, I imagine you've observed and experienced some setbacks with some of your clients. Do you have a story that you could share with us so people understand, just in a nutshell, what civility can do or can't, or what happens when it's not there?
Well, kind of building on something that is it still is a bit shocking to me. I was doing some work with a gypsum plant, and they asked us to come in because productivity in certain line was lower than on another line. And when we looked, we discovered that the only 4 women in the production team worked on the line where production was lower. And the management felt that they needed some training, some professionalism and civility and goal setting and those kind of things. And when we did an assessment, which we're prone to do before we engage in any kind of training, we discovered that the reason productivity was low is because there was no bathroom. These 4 women employees had to actually physically leave the building, put their coat and boots on, and when we're in Winnipeg, it's -40 sometimes, and walk across the parking lot to an outhouse 365 days a year, morning, noon, or night, whatever their shift was, in kind of a desolate place. They did not feel safe. They did not feel like basic human needs were met. And they needed time off the floor to manage basic human functions. And to me, that's civility at the one end of the continuum, about just basic human kindness. Just what do people need to be reasonably satisfied at work, never mind feel safe and happy, should come further down the pike. My dad used to say, what's this about having to be happy at work? We call it work for a reason. Big girl panties on and work. It's
Yeah.
not always going to be easy, but civility isn't about making things easy, but it's about easing the experience of others. And all the way the continuum, we find unequal hiring practices. And I often say that respectful workplace policy, for the most part, are not worth the paper they're written on, because they're kind of an after the fact communication piece that doesn't inhibit or prohibit the incivility. It's just, how do we address it after it happens? It's almost like saying, it's going to happen, so here's what you do when it does. To me, it's not preventative. But in terms of general stories, I've got a million of them. But I think at the root of it, we want people to actually, it doesn't have to be expensive. It's not always about somebody wanting something that is unreasonable. At the root of people treatment, whether it's children in school, people at home with their families, people in the community, at work, wherever, it really is about pausing to remember that we're human beings. We're interacting with people who have real needs and feelings and emotions and competencies and interests and goals and so on. And just to be present to that, initially, and show some compassion and consideration, not in a fuzzy, kissy face, huggy kind of way. That's never appropriate for workplace, but just on the surface, this initial pause and be present to people. It's really critical, and it can change workplace culture very, very quickly.
Oh, so back to the, I think that's fascinating that you get fairly quick results. What about the gypsum company? How did they, what kind of, what kind of benefit did they see once they were told, or, once this was identified for them? Did they take action to make that change? And what happened to that company after?
Oh, yes. And, what was surprising to me is that about 80% of the men on the floor were actually happier about the shift to, there were two men's washrooms in the building. And they just made one into a women's bathroom and made the other outdoor ones overflow. I think initially people were just afraid because of that kind of old style environment to speak up, but it was, really the men that applauded management more so than the women. And it changed the way management was perceived. It changed the way the women felt in terms of level of general respect in the workplace. It very, very quickly, of course, what management was concerned about was productivity on the line. Clearly that bounced back almost overnight. It's really interesting to me when you actually truly care about people and take action that's grounded in caring, how that can impact the bottom line, and you actually recoup that investment, which is often not monetary, in all kinds of ways very quickly.
Yeah. No, it sounds like we're starting to treat employees as part of your family members, or part of your team that is going to drive a company forward and do great things, rather than just saying it's employee number 12347, right?
Yes, and I mean, that's an interesting balance, of course, we try to strike. So one of the things I'm constantly trying to explain to leadership in organizations when we do civility training is that it's not about hand holding, it's not about coddling people, it's not about being so sort of family oriented that it's difficult to hold people accountable. At the end of the day, somebody has to lead, and you have to be able to make hard decisions. You have to be able to boss people. You have to be able to give directive feedback, and there has to be consequences and accountability, but it's how you engage in those communications, the consistency with which you monitor your tone, your word choice, the timing and approach in those communications. And what we're finding is many people would do better if they knew better, but a lot of supervisors that are promoted early on in their careers, or young presidents, young people brilliant with 3 degrees, but no real life or social or field experience. Often they want to do the right thing in terms of people treatment, but they haven't been trained in soft skills. It's kind of been forgotten. And civility is soft skills, but they're critical soft skills.
Yeah. So how does a company know that this is what's happening, or how they can make, say, a business case for it? I mean, you gave a good example of the gypsum company that thought they had a training problem, and they actually had a different problem. So how does a company know that this is something that is happening in their organization that needs to be addressed?
Right. And what's interesting about the statement you just made is we find, when we do our assessments, probably 40% of the time the organization does not need training. They
Mhm.
need some other civility-oriented solution. Sometimes it's the policies themselves that are fostering incivility. But we have some assessments. There's 2 that are free, for example, on our website at civilityexperts.com. There's a civility symptoms survey that if anybody wants that, it's got a checklist of things to watch for that sometimes people don't immediately recognize as tied to civility. You can email admin@civilityexperts.com, and AJ will send you that. There's a civility compass assessment on our site that we send you back a pretty report with some recommendations about which of the indicators you might pay attention to, what's the consequence of not doing so. And those assessments are no fee for them. Of course, there's other organizations that have all kinds of really great assessments. We partner with some of those. But I would say part of it is really, truly wanting to resolve the problem, because sadly, the research also suggests that hands down, more than 65% of the time, the problem is leadership, that the incivility stems from leadership style, from uncivil communication that's top down, from leaders' inability to relate in a satisfactory and effective social level. And again, I don't think that those people behave badly just because they have the power to do so all the time. Our research suggests that, again, people would do better if they knew better. They simply haven't experienced civility, so they don't know how to respond in kind, or they really, truly have never been trained in those skills.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense, where people say, well, when you go into this industry, just be prepared for this kind of treatment. And it's like, it's not always true. It's, not industry specific. It becomes the supervisor or the manager or the CEO or whoever is in that leadership role dictates how that person or that employee is going to have their experience at that workplace.
That's right. And I think it's important to recognize, we treat civility as a change initiative, and some organizations simply are not change ready. And sometimes it takes a leadership change or replacing some personnel, or, there's all kinds of ways to approach it. But the fact is, shifting from our habit of being curt with people, unconscious and conscious bias, some of the habits that form in well-established workplaces and sometimes across a sector, it's going to take some time and energy to shift that. Not always money and not always extensive training, but it's going to take a commitment and some attitude shift. And, sometimes that aspect of change, organizations are simply not willing to make the change, or they don't believe initially that soft skills can increase their bottom line by an average of 30%, which is what the research indicates across the board.
Yeah, and it sounds like in a lot of ways that it's sometimes the hardest work to do is the inner work or the mindset or the attitude, right?
Oh, of course, it's no different than with, individuals in our personal life, right? Making a decision that I'm not going to use certain words anymore because they're considered inappropriate from a cultural point of view. It's no different in a workplace culture, making decisions about word choice or nonverbal gestures or behaviors or approaches. And so all of those aspects of civil communication are teachable, but somebody has to be willing to require that people be held accountable for those changes in behavior.
Right. Yeah. What I love that you've done is that you now have representatives for civility all across the planet, and I think it's it's a crossroads kind of time right now, and the current conditions are having an impact. How are they impacting the civility piece? Is it a higher platform now that people can see this as being a thing to choose?
Well, I think that the word civility comes up in searches significantly more often than it did, say, 6 months ago. But I think, again, people misunderstand what civility is, and there are, always opportunists who kind of jump on the bandwagon, and, civility in politics is a hot button topic. There are, I don't know, probably 200 good organizations that specialize in civil dialogue related to politics and bridging the divide across parties and so on. That's not an area of expertise that I personally venture into because I'm not terribly involved in politics in that way. But there are many conversations being started, and a lot of the core strategies for what I would call listening with Ting, which is a particular technique that we teach, and practicing and learning non-judgment. Some of the core principles that we teach for civility at work would certainly apply to civility in politics. I have the advantage of doing a little bit of work with peacekeepers. I spent some time in Rwanda, which was life-changing for me, but the same way you approach a conversation with someone you disagree with at the grocery store about the quality of the steak you want to buy, some of the core strategies apply if you're negotiating, peace between two tribal groups. It all boils down to respect, which from a civility point of view is something you should never have to earn, and trust, which you do need to earn. And that's one of the initial conversations I think that's critical, is defining the terms. How does the organization or individual define civility? Do they understand that respect is a basic human right, not something that you choose to dole out? Trust is something that you have to earn. That conversation about the terms and being aligned in terms of frame of reference is really critical to success with civility.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the experience in Rwanda, like you said, was life-changing. Was there the highlight that you learned from that then color-coded the rest of your work in civility because of that experience?
Well, really, for me, the reconciliation cities. So, if you know anything about Rwanda, there were two tribes, Hutu and Tutsi. Genocide happened, and the president of the country actually legislated peace in terms of, you can't use certain terms, you can't use those labels. People are people. The reconciliation cities. A woman I met was married to a man from the opposite tribe who actually killed her brother and children in front of her. Like the extent of forgiveness and reconciliation across the country, and real, authentic, genuine compassion and forgiveness and love. It was really, it kind of makes worrying about your neighbor's dog pooping on your front lawn being an unforgivable gesture. It just kind of put things in perspective for me and changed the way I understand what people are capable of, and from a positive perspective, not just, kind of the human condition and human nature, but really people potential and what positive people treatment can really, truly be like.
Yeah, and on that, I know that you focus on with the people treatment. It's like a 30% profit solution. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, so Weber Shadwick, we have a whole book called The 30% Solution. It's on Amazon if anyone's interested. But Weber and Shadwick found that on average, organizations that embed civility, specifically aspects of civil communication, into their policy and procedures, experienced on average 30% more engagement, retention and profitability. So there's certainly a solid business case. There's other research too, but our book is based on that research, and kind of the how to do it and so on is covered in the 30% solution. But, we see in terms of day to day, if you call it retention, the way teachers are taught to interact with young people, the way parents interact with children, the way community leaders interact with community members, those same strategies, we see measurable impacts, positive impacts in, retention, and positive aspects like productivity, contribution, return, all of that kind of relational wealth, really tremendous measurable impacts.
I love that term, relational wealth. It says everything in a nutshell. If you have great people, you're going to have a great opportunity for your business as a going concern, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you also mentioned that a lot of the profits that you would happen to see from this are not always dollar, not always ring a dollar sign or a number sign. It comes into how the workplace changes. Do you have one that was sort of like a most notable workplace change?
Well, we have constant workplace change, but if I can talk for a minute about the, kind of tied to that, Landa, the pivot piece and the profit, what I've found, to your point you just made, is that because I'm a civility trainer, we have affiliates around the world who come from countries and situations where there is no way, if I was focused on the profit at that moment, that we would have relationships and that those people would be in positions to make the change. And I learned a long time ago that, as I mentioned, civility is its own reward. And when you're able to adapt to the change, somebody who would email me every day for 90 days straight, 3 times a day, and say, please trust me, if you could just give me the benefit of the doubt, train me, send me a couple lessons, I promise I will repay you every penny of the cost. I just need someone to take a chance and trust me and get started. And that happened to me once, and then subsequently probably 50 or 60 affiliates. We have what I would describe as an in-kind, pay it forward kind of relationship. And that ability to sort of change or reframe what I perceive as profit, that relational wealth component. Some people call it karma, whatever you want. But to me, now those people have had tremendous impact, and they've been able to generate profits, but same thing, to reframe, we pivot in times of change, but to me, pivot can mean all kinds of things, and that sort of reframing, reassessing, realigning, maybe your actions with what you thought were your goals. That resiliency, to me, that kind of heart wealth, that kind of profit in people.
Yep.
To me, that's really served me well. And some of my advisors and accountants and others would say, Lew, you should have made a whole lot more money by now in terms of the big picture and being at it 26 years. But I think that a lot of the profit is about integrity, and I earn a great living, and I'm grateful for all of that. But I think that the pivot for me, and I have some friends and supporters and others who really encourage me this way, but that being able to shift your mindset, not just the way you make decisions, right? I hope I'm making sense. I feel like I'm babbling a little bit.
No, it is. It's making total sense. It's a nice way to bring it all together. Is there anything else that you'd like the listeners to remember, or if you have any 1 or 2, 3 ideas for them to take away?
Oh, I would just say that it doesn't matter what kind of business you're in, whether you're a lawyer or a banker or own a manufacturing company, whether you teach, cut hair. It doesn't matter what you do. At the end of the day, people observe, people pay attention, people talk about, people remember how you make them feel. And oftentimes choosing to forfeit high tech, or what I would call, well, we call it high tech and we call it high tone, like this kind of frequency of money bit, for high touch, which is this real connection with people. To me, you will reap endless rewards, and I've seen it happen countless times. And I would say always, pause for a moment and think about, what good can I do here? What can I give versus what can I get back? And you'll get back threefold.
It's like coming from a serve energy in a way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That sounds great. Well, thank you. Can you let the listeners, just before we wrap up, can you let the listeners know where they can get a hold of you and any sort of links you wanted to highlight or book titles?
Sure. So you can email me directly. I'm Lew, Lew, at civilityexperts.com. We do have online learning, civilityexpertsonline.com. If you visit the website, civilityexperts.com, I think we have 16 books now at Amazon. You could just Google Lew Bayer or Dr. Lew Bayer. And we're offering a free book, actually. If you go to our website, civilityexperts.com, and scroll down, there's a banner at the bottom. All you have to do is sign up for our mailing list, and we'll send you a hard copy book that you can hold in your hands. Thank you.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Lew. I really appreciate you coming on to the show today. I really liked how you talked about civility being its own reward, and about what you can give versus what you can get, and also just the general insights on civility and how it can trickle into your bottom line of your organization in more ways than just dollars. So thank you for listening. And if anybody wants to talk pivots and profits in between episodes, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great day.
The reason why each of us comes to this earth, and your actions will always speak louder than words, and you'll never know what you're capable of until you try.